The topic that we're going to go over is why the nation of Israel, why the Jews have been persecuted so heavily. Because on the face of it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And the reason is, if you go with the Palestinian explanation, every single people on the planet are living on land that they took from somebody else. Nobody lives in a place that was always theirs. Everybody did that. We took it from the Indians. They took it from the Indian tribes before them. The people that originally settled here are long gone, okay? And everybody is on land that they took from somebody else. So the idea of, yeah, we should exterminate the Jews because they're sitting on land. What about all the pogroms before that? How do you explain that, the attempted extermination over and over and over again? And I think that the answer is biblical. It is spiritual, right? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Now, we're also going to talk about the unseen world, demonology. Where do demons come from? Because they are related to each other. So there are actually two topics that we're going to cover today. I want to try to cover it in one program, just because I don't want to turn this into a series. Well, I think the information is fascinating, and it does color art. When you understand what I'm going to talk about today, once you see this, you can't see the Bible the same way, because it does go against church tradition in some ways, but the Bible actually speaks for itself, and I think in several areas, church tradition has been wrong regarding demonology. Okay, and once you see that, other verses start to make sense. Okay, it makes sense. We're going to be talking about passages in apocryphal Jewish works, such as the book of, Enoch, Jubilee, Jasher. Those are Jewish apocryphal works. Some of those works are actually considered scripture by the New Testament authors. They are quoted in the New Testament. But we don't have those complete books. So it's not in the Bible because we don't have the originals. We only have pieces of the originals. That's why they're not included. But they were considered scripture by the New Testament authors. It's very clear that the New Testament authors considered this scripture. Jesus refers to these works. Okay? So it can't be, I think it's unwise for the church to have ignored them completely. And as a result of ignoring them, and as a result of not including these in seminary, a lot of pastors are unfamiliar with this stuff. And so when they come to verses like in 2 Peter or Jude, they don't know what to make of it. They're like, where did this come from? It comes out of left field, and they're going, what are they talking about? Well, it's because they're in books that aren't in the Old or New Testament. They're in, these are books that are published in the intertestamental period. The intertestamental means between the Old and New Testaments, okay? And so we have a lot of theology that has come out between those two testaments, and that was like when you get to Jesus in the New Testament, there are a lot of weird things that have happened that you don't see in the Old Testament. And you're going, what is happening? For example, in the Old Testament, did the prophets cast demons out of people all the time? Did you see a lot of that where the prophets would walk around and somebody demon-possessed and they cast it out? Did you see very many exorcisms? No. But you get to the time of Jesus and demons are popping up all over the place. Everybody knows about demons. What happened? What's going on here? And everybody in that culture is like, oh, there's something wrong with that guy. Must be a demon. Oh, they can't hear. A demon has made him deaf. Oh, that guy over there is blind. What demon did that to him? And it's like, go back to the Old Testament. Were there discussions like this back? No. So what happened? Well, that we're going to talk about. This is a video of Mr. Zatkoff. And he is a Christian that did an experiment, and this is the results of his experiment. If you read books about what hallucinogenic drugs do, there's a very good work called DMT, the spirit molecule, where they go through all the scientific literature on the trips that people have with DMT. And it sounds like these people, when they go into that spirit realm or that drug-induced realm, they are meeting creatures that are described as lizard-like or insect-like, all right? And it's very consistent, and it sounds like you're meeting demons. Now, these demons are either hostile or indifferent to the person. So it definitely seems like if you take hallucinogenic mushrooms or hallucinogens, there is some possibility that you are going to come out of your body and go into the spirit realm and meet demons. So he's going, well, I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian in good standing with the Lord, and if I took these and I go into the spirit realm, maybe I'll meet Jesus. Maybe I can have a one-on-one with the good guys because I'm covered by the blood of Christ and I'm protected, and so I can go over there safely, right? And there's no prohibition against using hallucinogenic substances in the Bible, right? So here I go. So he takes himself some, not DMT, he used hallucinogenic mushrooms. And he had an experience that was much scarier than he thought he was going to have.
In this hand, and all of a sudden on my right hand I just see like 20, 30 demons, and on my left it was like the kingdom of heaven. I can't explain it. The kingdom was almost veiled in a sense. It was like if you put like a real thin white sheet over something, you could still see what everything is, but the fullness of its glory wasn't revealed. I'm in a hand in the middle of this abyss, and I knew hell was under me. It was just a dark abyss of blackness, but I knew if I got dropped, like, I was done. All these demons are on my right side, and they step like they're speaking to heaven. I'm in the middle, like in the hand, like, oh my gosh. And they said, this one that was like bigger than the other one stood up, and he said, we're tired of this kid. They said, he keeps coming to our kingdom and taking people out. And then he came back and ate off our table. Once he said that, it was like everything hit me. Like the fullness of my mistake was like, oh my gosh, what did you do? And then at that point, it was like, I'm still not being able to breathe. I'm still not being, like, I'm in full-blown fear. Now I'm seeing this stuff happen right in front of my eyes. I can't breathe. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please have mercy, please have mercy. I'm in this situation for a while. I don't know how long, but for a good amount of time, it's like they're having conversations that I can't hear. There was a court, I was in like the courts of heaven, like there was a court case happening and I'm getting persecuted by the devil. I can't hear what's going on. And all I know is I'm terrified. I knew that if I got dropped from this hand, that these demons were gonna like take me, or I was just gonna drop into an abyss of hell or something. Like, I wish I could find the words for how helpless I felt. Like, I was in a hand and knew that there was nothing I could do, and that these demons were coming to get me. Like, they were like, this kid invited us here, he broke a law, and like this was a major infraction, and we're coming to get justice on this. That's how it felt. And
he presents a pretty interesting scenario. The violation was he decided, as a Christian, I am going to take hallucinogenic mushrooms to induce a spiritual experience. What's the worst can happen? I'm covered by the blood of Christ. He goes over there and he finds himself with this hand holding him up. And on one side are demonic entities, on the other side are the courts of heaven. And they're having a battle, a legal battle. And the demons are saying, he's legally ours because he crossed this line. That makes him our property. And the angels are arguing something else. You can't hear the full conversation, but that is the gist. There is a legal battle going over his status because there are rules. They get certain people who commit certain crimes. Presumably that's why we have all these prohibitions against occult practice, because when you engage, something legal happens between the angelic forces of darkness and the kingdom of God. Okay? And that seems to be what's happening. And that's crazy, because we don't have in the Bible a warning against hallucinogens, but clearly it's a bad thing. You know, crossing that, says when he says they ate, you came in here and ate off our table. That is language right from 1 Corinthians, when people were eating food sacrificed to idols, and Paul said, you're eating off the table of demons. And so the demons use that very same thing. It says, yeah, you ate off our table. That's apparently hallucinogens are food from the other side, like eating food sacrificed to idol, ingesting hallucinogens purposely to have an out-of-body experience or to have a hallucinogen experience. If you do that, that is something that legally puts you in the realm of the enemy. So we have this legal thing going on between the force of darkness and the force of light. The question comes up. Where did these demons come from? Where did they come from? In the New Testament, they're all over the place. In the Old Testament, you don't hear them so clearly described. So where did they come from? According to church tradition, and I have taught this myself for years up until this last few books that I've read, I was under the impression, I went along with church history, that sometime before the creation of mankind, Lucifer fell. He took 1/3 of the angels with him, and they joined his side, and those 1/3 of angels became the demons that we know today. And this all happened before the creation of man. That was the assumption. And that whole picture is based on one verse in the book of Revelation where the devil fell and with the tail of the dragon swept 1/3 of the angels with him.
There was a war in the heavens.
Yes,
1/3 of the
1/3. Exactly. And the thing is that what Heiser points out is that if you take a look at the language there, that does not necessarily mean that 1/3 of the angels joined him, but that in the battle, he defeated 1/3 of the angels in the battle before it was finally won. And God did win, but Satan, it was a hard fight. It was a hard fight. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he took them with him. We don't know when. The Bible doesn't tell us when that battle took place. However, we do know that there were 3 rebellions where the angels turned against God. And we have them in the Bible. There are 3 rebellions. And with each rebellion, those angels that rebelled became demons. All right? In the 3 rebellions. The first rebellion was one guy. It was Satan, okay? The person that who became Satan, okay? Now, first of all, let's start here. We use terms angels to describe God's first family. Call them angels. Actually, that is wrong. We shouldn't be doing that because angel is a job description. That's like calling everybody here is, I know one bus driver, so all humans are bus drivers. An angel simply means messenger. There were lots of these. And the Old Testament refers to them as B'nai Elohim, the children of God, B'nai Elohim. And that can be good, bad, or indifferent. It simply describes what they are. They are God's first children, and they have free will just like us. They are made in the image of God, just like us. All right? But they naturally inhabit the spiritual realm, and we naturally inhabit this physical realm. But they are B'nai Elohim. And when God decided to make us, he decided, you know what? I'm going to make some more B'nai Elohim of a different nature and give them free will also. And the angels were included in this process, and they were going to help in all this. And then one of those B'nai Elohim said, you know what? I don't like this idea. I don't want these new kids on the block. Now, why did he not like us? Don't know for sure. Some, and I have thought this myself, is because we have that verse where Paul says, don't you know you shall judge angels? And therefore, ultimately, we will have a status higher than the angels. And he said, I don't want that.
Where does it say? I mean, I know that's in
this is strongly inferred by what he did in the Garden of Eden.
Oh,
okay. Because he wanted man to die. He did not want, because the intention of God in the Garden of Eden was to live with man. Eden was God's temple on earth. And this is where he and man lived together. And the objective was, I want to live there with man, and I want you to make the whole earth like the Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden was perfect. It was perfect. You didn't have to do any work. Food just popped out. There was no pollution, no bad stuff. All the animals were friendly. You had plenty of water. All your needs were met. Perfect temperature. Didn't even need clothes. I mean, it was perfect. Now, the rest of the earth was not as perfect. Okay, it was very good, but it didn't use the language. Eden was perfect. The rest of the earth was very good. So God's original purpose for man was to live with man together, and with man, man would expand and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and make it like Eden. So with God's help, man would spread out from the Garden of Eden, and the Garden of Eden would spread all over the whole earth. This perfection, that was what he had planned. Originally, Lucifer's coming in. Nope, I don't want that. I want man dead. Okay, and so he's going to do what did God really say so and so? And so he came in, threw a monkey wrench into things. And as far as we know biblically, that was the very first rebellion right there. One guy, Lucifer, one person, and the damage was horrific. Now, he's not called Satan yet. All right, he's just the serpent. And we don't know that he's Satan until you get to the New Testament, and that's how the New Testament describes it. But we didn't know that. Now, in the Old Testament, there is no Satan. There's nobody named Satan in the Old Testament. There is a title called the Satan. The Satan. Now, what is a Satan? That's a job title, just like angel. A Satan's job was to report. It was like a prosecuting attorney, a defense attorney, and a reporter in one. Okay? The angels have free will. So when they start going off the reservation, the Satan would report them, and they would bring them before the council. God didn't need the angels. He doesn't need us. But he created himself a family, and he says, okay, family members, children, let's all discuss this. Joe over here is going off the deep end a little bit. What do we all think of that? What should be done? All right, and so the Satan would bring these issues before the council. Or Betty over here is doing a great job. Everybody, give a hand clap for Betty, right? Okay, the Satan. All right, that's the job of the Satan. The Satan in Job is not Satan. The Satan in Job is just doing his job. What he's supposed to do is report. Okay, he was just doing his job. It isn't Lucifer. As far as we know, there's no evidence that that's Lucifer. Lucifer got kicked out of heaven. He wasn't allowed access. I was bothered by that. I was always bothered by that. You know, you curse him. He does the worst thing to humanity, and you let him come back in, and you're having a friendly conversation with this guy. What's up with that? It wasn't Lucifer. It was the Satan, one of many Satan. Not all the Satans were evil. However, Lucifer because Satan just means adversary, just means prosecuting attorney. That's it. It's just adversary. All right. Now Lucifer became the Satan. All right, because of the severity of his crime. So that was the first rebel. Second rebels. Now now we get a bunch of them. Now we don't know. We have no idea. There is no literature about the relationship between original Satan of Lucifer and the Watchers. Who are the Watchers? Watchers in Genesis chapter 6, these were the angels that God sent to earth. And he says, look, I want you to come down there, and I'm allowing you to come down there, take human form, but observe humanity. You know, maybe give them a few pointers or whatever to help civilization along. We don't know. Maybe that's where mankind learned how to make clothing, because I think making clothing on a loom is incredibly complex. I can't imagine coming up with that myself. Seriously, I find it baffling when I watch somebody work a loom to make clothing. I am like, that is so complicated. How could anybody possibly stumble across that? I think maybe God had a handle on that. Maybe those watchers were supposed to help with that sort of thing. But what did they do? They were told, do not intermarry with humans. And one of them said, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway. And he convinced the others to do it as well. And pretty soon, that's what they're doing. They're making babies with humans. Those babies that are part B'nai Elohim and part human turn out to be giants. And those giants are really bad. And as we go forth, I'm going to present evidence that that is actually correct, okay? Because there is very strong support that the book of Enoch was correct, okay? So here we go. When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide with man forever, for he is flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. Keep that in mind. So before the flood and after the flood, the Nephilim were there. You have to try to think about that, okay? Before the flood and after the flood. Now, this presents some theological problems, all right? Because if we assume that the Bible, word for word, every single thing is absolutely the truth with no deviation, we have some issues here. Because the Bible clearly says that nobody survived other than Noah and his family. So here we have an exception described in the Bible, an exception. But you know what? There are other exceptions. For example, it also says that nothing that has breath survived. Really? You telling me that whales were on the ark? Really? Whales and dolphin were on the ark? No. So I think the Bible uses hyperbole at this time. It's not like 100 billion% and everything. No, it's used from the perspective of Noah, everything he can see is gone. Okay? That's the perspective that we're getting, I think. All right, and so the idea that could there be absolutely no survival? When you wipe out, if you drop a nuclear bomb and only 4 people are left on the planet, and somebody said it killed everybody on Earth. And but you left 4 off. It's like, really? You wiped out 8 billion people and you're going to sit there and nitpick me over 4? Okay, and so I think we have to look at it that way. So clearly, somebody survived the flood that wasn't on that boat. Or the alternative is Noah's children were married to giants. Some giant women who had Nephilim blood. That's the other option that you have. Okay?
Or if the Nephilim are like the kind of angelic-like creatures, like the watchers, and they're not necessarily flesh and blood, then when they say no one survived, it doesn't apply to them because they're not really people.
Well, it says nothing that has breath survives, so it's very inclusive. It says everything with breath.
Yeah, but maybe the Nephilim don't necessarily have breath. I mean,
All right, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man and they bore children to them, these were mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. They were famous, mighty men. Now, the backdrop of the book of Genesis here is that, think about the cultures that existed. These people, these giants, were known throughout the world. Everybody knew. At the time this book came out, everybody knew about those giants. Greek culture, Mesopotamian culture, Assyrian culture, everybody knew who they were talking about because these guys were in all of the literature. So they're referring to all those famous giants that everybody knows about. Yeah, that's where they came from.
Do you think that was both before and after the flood then? Is what this was referring to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of his thoughts, of the thoughts of his heart, was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I've created from the face of the land, and animals, and creeping things, and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. Okay, so now we don't get here in Genesis a specific list of what were they doing that was so bad. You don't see that here. It is, however, in other books. So these giants were really, what do you think about it. If we had giants today, if you had people today that were 10, 11, 12 feet tall, how do you think they'd treat the rest of us little people? I mean, think about it. I mean, it's hard work. If you ever tried to farm, you realize how much sweat is involved, especially without power tools. It's a lot of work to farm. If you ever built something out of concrete or stone, it's back-breaking work. Who wants to do that? We want the benefits of that work, but we don't want to do it ourselves, let me tell you. Okay? I mean, it's really, really painful to live off the land. It's incredibly difficult. You try to grow crops, you got to worry about all the vermin, the deer, the raccoon, bugs, it's weeds. It's so much work to stay alive. What you want to do is have slaves do the work for you. And that's the first thing they did, is enslave humanity. And then when they weren't working hard enough, they started eating them. And when that didn't work, after that, they just devolved into animals, and then they start eating each other and fighting each other. So anyway, outside of Jewish literature, did any other cultures report on this relationship between godlike beings and humans intermarrying and giving rise to giants? Yes, we've got a ton of it. Okay, for one thing, just think about the Greek history and what you have with the Titans. Where did the Titans come from? The Titans were the product of the gods and man. Okay, that's where the Titans came from. In fact, in the Old Testament, they actually use Titan language to describe them. Titanos is one of the words for giants. So they actually describe, so you have the Greek mythology over there and the Hebrew story lining up and saying, that's where the Titans came from. And we hear that same story in Greek mythology, in the War of the Titans. Okay, children of the gods, Uranos, intermarrying with Gaia, the children of Earth. All right. There's other stories in the ancient Middle East. Amar Anis published some stuff. He was a cuneiform specialist, and he deciphered a bunch of cuneiform tablets that were really useful because it described more specifically this group of people called the Apkallu. The Apkallu were talked about quite a bit in the Middle East, in Mesopotamia, and the Apkallu are very, very similar. If you look at the history of the Apkallu, and this is Akkadian literature predominantly, but when you take a look at how they're described, you think, wow, this sounds a lot like what we have in the Bible. They sound like Nephilim because the giants that were born between the B'nai Elohim and women, those were called Nephilim, those giants. And the Apkallu sound very similar to those spirits, those B'nai Elohim and their children. Okay, so the Apkallu, in Mesopotamian religion, the term Apkallu is used for the legendary creatures endowed with extraordinary wisdom. So these are the B'nai Elohim, very, very wise, right? For they are cultural heroes from before the flood. The Apkallu are at the surface of the god Enki. Enki and E are the same god, okay? So what was Enki? Enki is often referred to as a lord of the underworld. The people, when you go down to death, he's the master of the underworld. And so basically, Enki, or E, would be the correlate of Hades in Greek mythology. Okay, so he's an underworld deity. In Christendom, we think of that as like Satan, because Satan was the lord of the death realm before Jesus defeated him at the cross. Okay, so that's what. So basically, this underworld entity, this what we would consider Satan-like entity, is the one that that basically that the Apkallu work for the dark side, if you will. But in Akkadian literature, these are all good guys. So the stories that I'm going to describe to you, think about it this way. Okay, in the Akkadian literature, you're going to have references to what we see in the Bible, but it's all reversed. It's reversed. So when the flood comes, God is the good guy, people are very unholy, and he's holy, and he destroys man for moral corruption. In their story, the head god, the supreme god, which is the head god right there, El, he's a bad guy. And he sends the flood because people are making too much noise. Oh, I just can't take this. People are making so much noise, I'm going to wipe them out. And so Enki, the good guy, goes, oh, we don't want that. I'm going to save somebody. And so they flip the story around. They flip the story around and make God out to be the bad guy, and the Lucifer character is the good guy who saves mankind. And so Enki decides, you know what? All this, because Enki was seen as they saw Enki as a good god, and when he brought all this knowledge to the pre-flood people, and the knowledge was bad stuff. It was sinning stuff. It had to do with adultery, fornication, bestiality, occult practice. That's the kind of crap that they brought to the pre-flood people. And so Enki wanted to make sure that that knowledge got passed on to the post-flood people. So he saved one of the Nephilim on a boat, and that Nephilim then got to repopulate the post-flood world. And the offspring of those surviving Nephilim were advisors to all of the kings after the flood. So every king had a Nephilim advisor after the flood. That's the picture that we've got here. Okay? So the Apkallu are used for legendary creatures endowed with extraordinary wisdom. They are cultural heroes from before the flood. They're in the surface of Enki. All right, the sages that survived the flood. So basically the wise people in these cultures of Acadia, Babylon, all these cultures. To be considered a sage, you had to show that you were related to the Nephilim. Okay, if you were related to the Apkallu, then your wisdom, then you have the right to pass on that wisdom. If you couldn't show your lineage, then you weren't a wise person. And so they wanted to make sure that every king had an Apkallu advisor. Babylon was very proud of their Apkallu heritage. So their kings had their kings were either Apkallu themselves or they had an Apkallu advisor. And Babylon prided itself. These are our heroes. We know astrology. We know about all the plants that can give you wonderful hallucinogenic experiences. We can tell you what the great sexual practices are. We are a great culture because the gods are governing our country. All right, so there's a relationship between the Watchers from the Book of Enoch, the fallen sons of God, and the Apkallu from Mesopotamian cuneiform history, and we're going to get into that. So what did the Apkallu teach? Divination, horoscopy, astrology, among other things. Okay, in Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh, you have Gilgamesh or Utnapishtim, okay, they're kind of used interchangeably. Gilgamesh was actually part god. He was called a master of the Apkallu, and so he's described as actually being, in biblical terms, he is Nephilim. Okay,
Wouldn't they say he's like 2/3 God?
Yes, that's exactly right.
How
That's
did he get that?
exactly
It's
right.
like,
Yes.
you know,
That is precisely how they describe him. Yes, that's exactly. Okay? So now, according to the Babylonian story, when mankind, when Utnapishtim, when he survived, the chief god was upset. I want them all wiped out, doggone it. But the other god said, "Oh, calm down, it'll be okay." And he said, "All right." Okay, and he was granted eternal life. So anyway, interpreted here is that we have description in the ancient writings of before the flood. We have the names of specific kings, and with the names of each of these 7 kings, we have the Apkallu that was their advisor. And so you see this relationship. And so this is relationship pre and post flood. Is that if you wanted to be a king of a region, what the normal thing to do was to couple a king with an Apkallu advisor to make sure that we have one of these Nephilim governing civilizations. So either you have some of the kings after the flood are described as being descendants from Nephilim themselves or having a Nephilim advisor. And this is how they were described. So you see, when you see a wing on somebody, that means they're from the gods. Okay, and so you have this not only described in the literature, you see it in pictorial format as well. It helps to explain why, well, we'll get into that anyway. All right, now the book of Enoch. Let's talk about that. So the book of Enoch tells you that all of the Nephilim were evil. There were no good guys. There wasn't a good Nephilim. They were all bad, and they did terrible, terrible things to lead mankind astray. It was much worse than what we see in the book of Genesis here. So I'm going to read what the book of Enoch says about that experience. It says, "And when the sons of man had multiplied in those days, beautiful and comely daughters were born to them. And the watchers, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. And they said to one another, 'Come, let us choose for ourselves wives from the daughters of men, and let us beget for ourselves children.' And Shemahazah, their chief, said to them, I fear that you will not want to do this deed, and I alone shall be guilty of a great sin." So here we see the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, and their leader saying, "You know what I want to do? I got nothing to you." And the other guy said, "Yeah, that's a good idea." All right. And then he says, "Okay, are you guys really going to do it? Because I'm going to do it. And I don't want to do it by myself. You're really going to do it?" "Yeah, we really want to do it." Okay, so he makes them swear. And they all answered him and said, "Let us swear an oath, and let us bind one another with a curse, and that none of us turn back from this counsel until we fulfill it and do this deed." And so they are, up until now, as far as we know, the only Son of God, the only angel, if you will, that rebelled against Yahweh was Lucifer. And they saw it happen to him. And now they're going to, with their free will, they are deciding, God said don't do it, but let's do it anyway. What's he going to do? Is it really that bad? I mean, because he forgives us all the time. Is it really going to be that bad? So let's all do it, because if we all do it, what's he going to do? He's not going to punish all of us, right? It's like how people think if we all commit the same crime in a mob, come on, let's do it. Let's do that. And so that's their idea. Anyway, and they answered him. Okay, so, and they all swore together and bound one another in a curse. And they were, all of them, 200 who descended in the days of Jared onto the peak of Mount Hermon. And they called the mountain Hermon because they swore and bound one another with the curse on it. And then it goes on and it lists all the names. I'm not going to go through that because it's irrelevant. So we've got a bunch of their names listed. So all I did. Okay. Then these and the others with them took for themselves wives from among those such as they chose, and they began to go into them and to defile themselves through them, and to teach them sorcery and charms, and to reveal to them the cutting of roots and plants. And they conceived from them and bore to them great giants. And the giants begat Nephilim, and that to the Nephilim were born Eluid, and they were growing in accordance with their greatness. They were devouring the labor of all the sons of men. In other words, they enslaved them. So they enslaved humans. And men were not able to supply them. So the humans couldn't keep up with the work that they were given them. And the giants began to kill men and to eat them. And they began to sin against the birds and the beasts and the creeping things and the fish, and to devour one another's flesh. And they drank the blood. Then the earth brought accusation against the lawless ones. So this is kind of, they descended. They started out as as angels and humans, and then their children were giants, but the giants devolved into animals. I mean, they just started every disgusting thing you can think. They said, okay, what would God want? Let's do the opposite of that and see what happens. And they just kept along that path. All right, and so we find evidence of cannibalism. I'm not going to go into all that. And Gigantus and
in the book you wrote, The Last Nephilim.
Yeah.
You described the modern day Nephilim, and he was like, sounded like he was normal size.
Yeah,
And he
that's
was like
not
a real nice guy.
Yeah, well, that was just for the sake of telling the story. But yeah, it's not consistent. That is inconsistent with the Bible. Okay, so yeah, that's a story. So yeah, but that you're right. You're right. If I were writing this today, I would have to alter quite a bit about what I said because I didn't know this stuff. So yeah, you're right. That was based on a picture of Genesis world that is actually different. Now we have. I was unaware. A lot of this information wasn't available until like 2010. Okay, and so and I had no idea that this stuff existed. So if I were writing that today, I would change the book. All right. So what's interesting here? Now the Apkallu, were they the watchers? Were the Apkallu the watchers that are described in the book of Enoch? The answer is yes. In Acadia, we found Apkallu figurines. Here you see them here. All right, and there's actually inscriptions on some of them. And in the inscriptions, it says, "You are the Apkallu figures, the watchers." It literally calls them the watchers. So here we have Akkadian literature describing Apkallu as the watchers, presumably the very same watchers that are described in the book of Enoch.
Is there a reason they use the term watchers?
Because that was their job. They were here. They weren't supposed to be interactors. They were supposed to be watchers, not doers. Okay, and they violated that. God said, "Okay, I'm going to give you bodies, and I'm going to let you inhabit a circumscribed area of influence. Stay in the line." They jumped outside of that line and disobeyed God. Okay, the watchers, here's the thing is, according to Babylonian literature, the watchers, the Apkallu, were good guys. They were heroes. In the Old Testament, the writers were actually counteracting this, and they were saying this is the actual history, and they were not good guys. They were not heroes. They were actually evil. And so the Hebrew writers, God counteracted the prevailing. The story of the day was that these were heroes in all of these great countries. Look at Egypt, look at Acadia, look at Babylon, all these great countries. Their claim to greatness is because of the gods. And they all the same thing. We are descended from the God. We have these godlike advisors. They're good. And along comes the Bible and says, no, your warrior heroes were not good guys. In fact, in Genesis, these Nephilim and their descendants, they became the Anakim, okay, and the Rephaim. These are bad guys. These guys became demons. So they were wicked. And so when these writings came out, they were actually telling the Israelites, the stories you've heard about why these nations are great, they're actually evil. All right, so what happened to them? This is important because it explains where do demons come from. Okay? So as the Watcher saga continues in 1 Enoch, the four archangels, Michael, Sariel, Raphael, and Gabriel, report on the travesty unfolding on earth. And God responds by decreeing the coming of the flood and ordering the offending watchers rounded up for judgment and thrown into the abyss. And Gabriel and God said, "Go, Gabriel, to the bastards and to the half-breeds, to the sons of this is a word I've never heard before, miscegenation. Miscegenation.
Where is this?
Miscegenation, right here.
I mean, where are we reading from?
Enoch, yeah. Yes, the first, Enoch. We do not have a full copy of the Book of Enoch. The copies that we do have had been changed by the Gnostics in the 2nd century, and so that's why we can't accept the whole book. However, the first half of the book is very consistent with the Old Testament, and it's quoted in the New Testament. Okay, but we don't have the full. If we had the full book, it would probably be in the Bible. Okay, but we don't. Okay. All right. To destroy the sons of the watchers from among the sons of men and send them against one another in a war of destruction. And the length of days they will not have, and no petition will be granted to their fathers in their behalf. that they should expect to live an eternal life, nor even that each of them should live 500 years. And to Michael he said, "Go, Michael, bind Shemahazah and the others with him, who have united themselves with the daughters of men, so that they were defiled by them and cleansed in their uncleanness. And when their sons," here is the key thing, "and when their sons perish, and they see the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, and until the day of their judgment and consummation, until the eternal judgment is consummated. And then they will be led astray into the fiery abyss, to the torture, to the prison, where they will be confined forever." This is the first, outside of the book of, I think it's Isaiah, this is the first description of hell. Okay, outside of the book of Isaiah.
Actually, it's even more, because the book of Isaiah is a little bit, this one makes sure that internal torment.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
It's not clear in the book.
It's not, exactly, yes. The valley of the Ben Hinnom,
argue
Yeah.
against the
Yeah.
doctrine of eternal, but this one
Yeah.
is very clearly.
It's very, very clear.
Clearly the doctrine of eternal torment,
There you
like
go.
we think of.
And then when Jesus said that hell was created for the devil and his angels, where did he get that? Well, he's God. He can get it anywhere. But here's a reference point. Those rebellious angels are at the end of the age are thrown into hell, where they'll be tormented forever into the fiery abyss, to torture and fiery abyss for eternity. It was created for the rebellious
So
angels.
this is where our modern imagery of hell comes from.
There you
with
go.
The idea of brimstone
Yeah,
burning.
yeah, there you go. God said, speaking to Enoch, okay, and here's what happened was, all right, now they didn't expect God to be so hard on them. This came as a shock, because Lucifer didn't get thrown into hell. I mean, my goodness, where'd that come from? I mean, Dad's really mad at us. I mean, we didn't expect him to get that mad. Good night. And so they're like, this judgment, that's so severe. We didn't think he would do that to us. And so Enoch, who was taken, he didn't die, he just went to heaven. And so Enoch apparently had the ability to bounce down between the two groups. And they tried to get Enoch and said, "Hey, Enoch, could you put in a good word for us?" You didn't know why they thought they were going to get a good word. Okay, and so Enoch brought the request to the Lord and says, "Hey, they really, could you commute their sentence a little bit? I mean," and so they're asking me to do that. And God was like, "Please." All right, and so God, speaking to Enoch, says, "Go and say to the watchers of heaven who sent you to petition in their behalf. You should petition in behalf of men, not men in behalf of you." In other words, you were supposed to be there to watch and to comment on the behavior of men and so forth, and to be on their side. You were supposed to be an advocate of humanity. They're not supposed to be coming to protect you. It was supposed to be the other way around. You were there to help humanity, and my goodness, look what you did. So God is pointing that out. "Why have you forsaken the high heaven, the eternal sanctuary, and lain with women, and defiled yourselves with the daughters of men, and taken for yourselves wives, and done as the sons of earth, and begotten for yourselves sons, giants? But now the giants who were begotten by the spirits of flesh, they will call them evil spirits upon the earth, for their dwelling will be upon the earth. The spirits that have gone forth from the body of their flesh are evil spirits. For from humans they came into being, and from the holy watchers was the origin of their creation. Evil spirits they will be on the earth, and evil spirits they will be called. The spirits in heaven is their dwelling, but the spirits begotten in the earth, on earth is their dwelling. And the spirits of the giants led astray do violence, make desolate, and attack and wrestle and hurl upon the earth and cause illnesses." So he's saying, okay, you guys, those Nephilim, when they become unbodied, they become demons. They don't get to go back to heaven. They are confined to the earth, and they have the ability to harm humans. They can actually cause people illnesses. And so when you get to the New Testament, when people get sick, they say, has a demon, has a demon, has a demon. What are they talking about? This is what they're talking about. Demons having the ability to inflict illness on mankind. Yeah.
Is Enoch a man or an angel or?
He's a human. He's a human, but he's a spirit now. He's in heaven.
Enoch was a character in the
Yeah.
Old Testament, and what made him special was he didn't die.
Yeah, yeah.
He was taken
So
up.
it said he
directly
walked with
to
God.
heaven.
Yeah, that's
You know,
right.
They,
Yeah.
they make that point.
Yeah.
They give him just about 3 lines.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
He's
like-
not described as very.
Prophet.
Well, he was. Yes, he's perceived. I mean, the Book of Enoch gives you the whole picture, but you don't have that picture in just Genesis. Genesis gives him very brief line.
He's like in one of those Genesis, like Methuselah and all
Yeah.
those characters, where they give you all those genealogies
Yeah, yeah.
of people living 900, 800 years. Enoch only lived 300 years, and then God took him.
Yeah, yeah. And see, here's a question that I always wondered. You know, as I've studied demon possession as a psychiatrist, I've had a couple cases, and I always wondered why these demons, when people are possessed, why are they so disgusting? Why are they so about, deviant sexual practices and wanting to defile things and like animals? Why are they such animals? If they are the descendants of angels, even though they're rebellious angels, why are they, say, organic? Okay, I mean, why do they? How can because these people that are possessed are behaving like animals. So what the heck? Where did that come from? How does an angel behave like an animal? I just couldn't get my head around that. It makes no sense. I can see them being angry at Christians and at God and trying to mess you up theologically. But this whole wanting to rape little kids and have all this sexual crap and everything, and it's like, where does that come from? But if you understand that they came from creatures that were half human, and so those organic appetites and disgusting, you think about the behavior of those Nephilim, where they were committing bestiality and gross sexual sins and all this kind of, they were like all of the lower sins that man creates. They did that to the max. And so when you think about, okay, when people are possessed by these demons, they know the human experience. They know what it is to act like an animal and to be completely vile and grotesque and just all this organic. That's where that comes from. Okay? So I thought that was very, very interesting. Now, what is the evidence that these passages in Enoch have that validity? 2 Peter 2, for God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment. And did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood of the world of the ungodly. So where does Peter, Apostle Peter, get this? Where do you think that comes from? That's right out of the book of Enoch. Okay? There's nowhere else. That's not in the Old Testament. Okay? So, he did not spare the angels who sinned. What did they do to sin? They intermarried with humans. Jude 1. Now, I desire to remind you, though you will know all things once for all, that the Lord, after saving a people out of the land of Egypt, subsequently destroyed those who did not believe. And the angels who did not keep their own domain, but abandoned their proper abode, he has kept in eternal bonds under darkness for the judgment of the great day. Directly referring to what we just read in the book of Enoch. So Peter and Jude both describe the events from the book of Enoch. Okay, that's where that comes straight out of Enoch. They treat it like it's gospel. Okay.
But if those are bound, how can they be the demons that are running?
Okay. We have 2 populations. You have the B'nai Elohim,
Right.
and then you have their offspring, the Nephilim. The B'nai Elohim is who he's talking about. Those are the angels. B'nai Elohim are pure angels.
Oh, so the
Yeah.
demons are the offspring.
Got it. There you go.
They're
There you
not
go.
bound, but
Exactly.
they're the offspring.
You got
the
it.
Ones who are
And
bound.
they were confined to the earth. They were not sent into the prisons. They were sent to earth as demons. Okay?
They were allowed to remain on the earth.
You got it. You got it. But you're right. They were allowed to remain on earth, and they have no access to heaven. So these demonics, no, there are angelic creatures that do, rebels that do seem to have access to, they can communicate, like such as what we talked about when we first got started. But those guys are on the earth, and they're animally. They're very animally. Okay? Another verse in Jude says, it was also about these men that Enoch in the 7th generation from Adam prophesied, saying, behold, the Lord came with many thousands of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all and to convict all the ungodly of their ungodly deeds which they have done in an ungodly way, and all of the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Where does that come from? Another line right out of the book of Jude. So just right out of the book of Enoch. And so the point is, is that the book of, now, do I believe in all of the Jewish apocryphal books? No, we do not have that. And the only reason I take this seriously is because of things like this. All right, Jesus refers to this stuff. The apostles refer to this. The New Testament writers, the book of Enoch was scripture at that time. Okay? Jesus was familiar with the whole book of Enoch. The apostles were familiar with the whole book of Enoch, and they consider it gospel. So that's why I bring this up. Now, what about Joshua? What about other work? No. I mean, I think they provide, I mean, it's interesting, but I don't accept it over Scripture. If there is a contradiction between apocryphal works and Scriptures, you always go with Scripture, okay? When you see a contradiction, you go with Scripture. You don't go with apocryphal.
So because the New Testament epistle writers were quoting Enoch, which means they regard it as authoritative.
Exactly.
And,
Yeah.
And you're saying that the other apocryphal, we don't find any evidence in the New Testament.
In some cases, it's actually contradictory, and so that's right away. As soon as you see a contradiction, you go out. You're gone.
And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is its blood. And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. And you, be fruitful and multiply. Increase greatly on the earth and multiply in it."
So here we see God's declaration that humans are made to image God, like a mirror. Okay, the fact that we are conceived, we are the image of God at conception. There's nothing about man that makes man special. I mean, in terms of there's no single attribute that makes you the image of God. It's the whole picture. The fact that you are what you are, even if you are not real smart, even if you are not real spiritual, you are man, and you are the image of God by the nature of that, okay? Other animals have many attributes that humans have. There's no one attribute that is 100% unique to man. But the whole picture is the image of God, okay? So and it says, if you kill man, you should lose your life because man is that special. If an animal accuses him, that's a violation as well. I find this very fascinating, and I wonder why the rest of the world doesn't get this. When you see humans attacked by animals, it's so bizarre. Very rarely, it does happen occasionally, but very rarely do they finish the meal. Okay? Most of the time, when humans are attacked, the animals walk away. Okay? You think about how many times where you see humans attacked by a crocodile or an alligator, and they find the gator later, and the kid is still in the crocodile's mouth. It's like, what's up with that? Any other animal would have been consumed by the next day. And yet, the alligator's walking around, kid's still in his mouth.
They've done a study recently, read that they found when they trade sounds, the sounds of humans cause fear in the wild animals.
Yes,
in Africa
that's
more
very
than
good.
anything else. More than tigers, and well, they don't have tigers. They had lions and all these other predators. Humans were by far the most feared.
Wow, that's interesting. I'd like to see
like
that.
Elephants and stuff. Oh,
really?
we're getting humans. It's time to scare.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah. The last one was Og. He was the last one. According to Scripture, he was the very last one. The children of Israel, when they crossed the desert, they went to the Promised Land and they sent the spies in. And the majority of the spies said, "We can't. There's giants there. We were as grasshoppers in their eyes and in our own eyes. There's no way." And two of them. Remember who they were? Joshua and Caleb. Yeah. And they said, "No, we can do it." And the rest of them said, "No." So they wandered for 40 years out of fear. While they were wandering, their cousins wiped most of them out. Okay, so their cousins were there, and they were, they wiped out most of the giants. So by the time they got back there was a few. Goliath was one of the remnants of the Rephaim. Okay, so there were some Rephaim left. The last one, according to the Bible, was Og, and he was huge. I mean, Og was like twice the size of Goliath. So
Right.
Og was a monster. He was the last one, according to. And now again,
Well, I mean, but wasn't Og before Goliath? I mean, he was killed when they conquered the land because they
Well-
had like a bad. Well, maybe Goliath wasn't a pure. He was,
Yeah,
he just had-
yes, I think that because what the Rephaim bloodline, it's not like because they were intermarrying with humans, it gets diluted and diluted and diluted. Okay, so in terms of the really big giants, Og was the last one of the huge giants. Okay, so after the flood, God reiterates His command for humans. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, spread out. That's what I want. He didn't give them the law. They do not have the Mosaic law, so they don't have all these prohibitions. He said, look, what I want you to do, one command, spread out, repopulate. And that's one command. That's all He asked of them, one command.
At one time, all the people of the world spoke the same language and used the same words. As the people migrated to the east, they found a plain in the land of Babylonia and settled there. They began saying to each other, let's make bricks and harden them with fire. In this region, bricks were used instead of stone, and tar was used for mortar. Then they said, come, let's build a great city for ourselves with a tower that reaches into the sky. This will make us famous and keep us from being scattered all over the world. But the Lord came down to look at the city and the tower the people were building. Look, he said, the people are united and they all speak the same language. After this, nothing they set out to do will be impossible for them. Come, let's go down and confuse the people with different languages. Then they won't be able to understand each other. In that way, the Lord scattered them all over the world and they stopped building the city. That is why the city was called Babel, because that is where the Lord confused the people with different languages. In this way, He scattered them all over the world.
Question number one, who's God talking to? Come, let's go down there and confuse their
I
language.
would assume it was the Trinity.
It's not the Trinity. It's not. He doesn't have to talk to the Trinity because they have the same brain. They're one, and so the minute one person has a thought, the other one is. It's like the human brain.
Well, people talk to themselves. They
Yeah,
say,
but
yeah.
yeah. But here we have an example. We have an example of the council of gods in the Bible. The council of gods. Elohim is the term for God. Now, many times in the Old Testament, the term Elohim is referred to Yahweh. Yahweh is called Elohim many times, but Elohim is a generic term. All it means is spirit being. That's it. It could be a human, it could be an angel, it could be a demon, it could be God.
So God's
Okay.
talking to His retainers.
Exactly.
Like He's a king. And
Yeah,
the king is
exactly,
surrounded by
exactly.
all His retainers, and it says,
You got
okay, you counselors, retainers, and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we're going to do.
And the
Well,
best example of this, the very best example of this, is what happened to Ahab. Remember Ahab? When God decided it was time for him to die, He says before the...
wasn't there a lying spirit? Is that-
Exactly. He said, okay, guys, we're going to take him out. Anybody got an idea how we're going to do this? And the spirit says, I got an idea. I'm going to go down there as a lying spirit, and I'll tell everybody it's okay. And God says, good idea. Do it. Okay, and so here we have in the Bible a description of when God doesn't need the angels, but He wants family. He created the angels as His first family. He says, okay, kids, let's do this. All right, He likes family. He doesn't want to just be it's all about me. He wants to share.
Well-
And here He is sharing the direction of the world, the ruling of the world with His kids. Okay.
And, I think that God allows us, He could do everything Himself,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't learn. I just remember my dad teaching me how to repair things, and it's like He could have done the job in
Yes.
a quarter of the time.
That's
I
right.
did,
That's right,
but
yeah.
I wouldn't have learned anything.
Yeah,
Right?
very good. Yes.
And it's like my job, frankly, wasn't as good as his.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the point. I mean, I would not have learned anything if he had done it.
It's loving when a parent shares with you something useful like this, something that they're passionate about. It's love. It's love. Okay. There's so many people today, that they come through childhood and don't know anything about how to function in the real world. They were never made to wash their own clothes or to prepare their own meals. And they get out of college And they associate DoorDash with food, and they wonder why they never have any money. They don't know how to do hardly anything because their parents never sat them down and taught them stuff like this. It's loving to teach your kids cool things that you need to survive. And so here God is saying, come on, I made these people. Let's have a good time. Everybody, let's get involved in here and let's do the ruling of these people. Let me get your ideas and, use your individuality and let's come up and do some creative things here. And so we see that there is a council of gods, if you will. The B'nai Elohim, the good B'nai Elohim, are involved in the decision making regarding humanity here. And so God's saying, okay, you guys, let's do this. Let's gonna go where, okay, here's the problem. Humanity, the civilization is moving too fast. We don't want that to happen. Now we know why. I think that previous generations were totally clueless. Why would God do that? Your civilization is growing, and you guys, he told them, for one thing, spread out. And they said, and they're saying here, nope, let's not do that. Let's not spread out. Let's stay right here. And we know how to make bricks. And in fact, the Garden of Eden is on a mountain. Let's build our own mountain. And we got kicked out of Eden. We're going to force our way back up there, man. We're going to make a tower so high, we're going to go up there and be with God. So we're going to undo the curse, man. We're going to go back. So we're not gonna wait till we're gonna walk ourselves right back up there to God, and so God makes a comment that if they keep on this track, there's nothing they're gonna be able to do everything. And I think previous generations didn't know that AI was coming. They didn't know that nuclear bombs were coming. And had mankind stayed together, we could have reached our current technological advancement. We could have reached this 2,000 years ago. We could have. We could have done this 2,000 years ago. We could be right where we are now. And look how close we are to ending everything right now. Okay? So now it makes sense. Our ancestors didn't get that. They're like, what's the this doesn't make sense. Why would God want to stop our technological advancement? Why would he do that? Now you know. Now you know. Okay. So he scattered people. He had the spirits come down, he had the B'nai Elohim come down and confuse the languages, and in confusing the language, he separated the nations. This is where, it's the only place in the Bible where this happens. This is called the separation of the nations. So people were taken from Babel and they were divided. They all migrated to their particular geographic locations, and the nations were separated right here in Genesis chapter 11. When God separated the nations, okay?
I always thought it was a neat way. He could have sent a lightning bolt.
Yeah.
Could have destroyed an earthquake, but he just had a very elegant way.
Yeah. It was. Now, we have Deuteronomy 32, which gives you the other part of the puzzle here. Deuteronomy 32, remember the days of old, consider the years for past ages. Ask thy father, and he shall relate to thee, thine elders, and they shall tell thee. When the Most High divided the nations, Genesis chapter 11, he separated the sons of Adam and set the bounds of the nation according to the number of the angels of God, the B'nai Elohim. So he set over each nation, there were B'nai Elohim. Okay, so over each of these geographic locations, there are angelic beings who are actually in charge of that region. Their job is to do good, is to promote civilization, to get them along their way, and also justice, to stand up for the little guy, and to point them in the right direction. Because they didn't follow God's one rule and says, okay, you guys, help guide them. Okay, you do that. However, I am going to take Israel. Israel isn't invented yet, but I'm telling you right now, in the future, the children of Abraham, the children of Jacob, those are mine. So all these other nations are given to the B'nai Elohim, different ones. Everybody got their own piece of the pie, but Jacob is mine. Jacob is mine. All right, when he separates sons, he set the bounds of the nation according to the number of the angel of God, and his people, Jacob, became the portion of the land. Israel was the line of his inheritance. He maintained him in the wilderness, in burning thirst and to dry land. He led him about and instructed him and kept him as the apple of an eye. So Jacob is his. All the rest of the nations, all the Gentile nations, were assigned to the B'nai Elohim. The B'nai Elohim turned on him. They decided that they, instead of directing them to God, that they would direct worship to themselves. Instead of them offering sacrifices for their sins, as Noah did, they offered sacrifices to them. And these principalities and powers, these forces over these geographic locations, became demons. Okay, and so what happened is all of these nations had B'nai Elohim over them, and many of these B'nai Elohim turned bad, and they rebelled against God. Now, the thing is, in Jubilee, there is a troubling passage. And the reason that Jubilee is not a good source and it's not quoted in the Bible is because it says some things that are a little bit troubling. So here's that story. For the Lord did not draw Ishmael and his sons and his brothers and Esau near to himself, and he did not elect them because they are sons of Abraham, for he knew them. But he chose Israel that they might be a people for himself. And he sanctified them and gathered them from all the sons of man, because there are many nations and many people. They all belong to him, but over all of them he caused spirits to rule, so they might lead them astray from following him. So Jubilee is saying he assigned those B'nai Elohim. Their job was specifically to keep them from following God. What? Okay, that doesn't sound right. Is there any evidence in the Bible that that's wrong? There is. Book of Psalms.
God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. They have neither knowledge nor understanding. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. He said, you are God, sons of the Most High, all of you. Nevertheless, like men you shall die and fall like any prince. Rise, O God, judge the earth. For you shall inherit all the nations.
Okay, so here we see in Psalm 82, God judging those territorial spirits that he placed over all these countries turned against him. They were supposed to bring justice. He says, look at all these things. You were supposed to give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the right of the afflicted and desolate, rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. You were there to do good, to promote a godly civilization, to direct them to me. And they're walking around blind as a bat. These people are, these people you're supposed to help, they don't have knowledge or understanding. They walk about in darkness. What you didn't do your job. As a result, you are gods. You're B'nai Elohim. Guess what? You're going to die like men. So what happens when people die? Separates from God. That's what death is. You guys now are separated. You've become demons. And they really, I mean, if I could go on, because this is way too long, and I'm going to stop here. But the point is, they became the third round of demons. Round 1, Lucifer's rebellion, one guy. Round 2, the Nephilim, the Watchers. They became the next round, but they got sent to you don't see those guys, but their offspring, the Nephilim, they became round 2 of the demons. And round 3, the principalities and powers, the forces of wickedness in high places over all these nations. Now here's the thing. They're still alive. They're still doing their thing. Why do they hate Israel? Why? Because Jacob was God's. They never owned them. Okay, that was God. Now, when they went off and worshiped false gods, they put themselves under gods that hate them. The very gods of these places hate the Jews. Now, they can't attack Christians very easily because we are holy ground. I mean, if you have the Holy Spirit, wherever you go is holy ground. That supersedes the territorial spirits. When Jesus died on that cross, he took that authority back. When we accept Christ, we are no longer under the authority of those territorial demons. They're very limited as to what they can do to us. Nothing bad can happen to us unless God allows it. Anybody that doesn't have Christ, you still have territorial demons that are over you. Okay? And Judah, or the children of the Jews, their territorial deity is Michael under the direct effect of the Lord himself, and therefore they hate the Jews. They want to exterminate the Jews. Why? They're in rebellion against God. They want to get even with God. They're limited as to what they can do with Christians, but with Jews, especially disobedient Jews, they're a target. Until they come back to the Messiah, they are going to be a target. And that explains why every country they go to, Russia, Poland, wherever, you got all these pogroms where people are trying to exterminate them, this hatred of the Jews that goes beyond anything anybody else has had to endure for thousands of years. It explains this unexplainable, ridiculous anti-Semitism specifically directed at the Jews.
A pogrom is defined as an organized massacre, typically of Jews. Pogroms have been unleashed on the Jewish community across the world over generations by a wide variety of groups. Spanish Muslims in Al-Andalus in 1066, French and German Crusaders in the Rhineland in 1096, Cossacks in the 17th century in Khmelnytsky. The largest pogrom was, of course, the Holocaust. Well, since the Holocaust, the largest pogrom against Jews took place on October 7th of this year, when some 1,500 Israelis were murdered by Hamas terrorists. Since that pogrom, we've been told by our great thinkers that Hamas's brutality requires context. Never mind that body cam footage from Hamas terrorists reportedly included footage of Hamas killing a father, putting the father's baby in an actual oven, and then burning it to death, and repeatedly raping the mother while all of this went on. According to our pseudo-intellectuals, Hamas terrorists invading peaceful villages and slaughtering babies and raping women and shooting entire families, they weren't truly engaging in a pogrom. They were, in the words of some Columbia University professors, engaging in a military action. They were, in the words of some of our pseudo-intellectuals, engaged in a project of decolonization. No, say many of our thinkers, the Hamas pogrom wasn't really about killing Jews. It was actually about settlements in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. It was about the breakdown of negotiations with the Palestinian Authority. The massacres were anti-Israel. They were anti-Zionist, not anti-Semitic. And yet the pogroms against Jews continue. On Sunday, mobs of angry pro-Hamas pogromists stormed the airport in the Russian Republic of Dagestan looking for Jews. Apparently, they got word of a flight that had been scheduled to land from Tel Aviv. Here's what it looked like. It's a giant crowd out in front of the airport, screaming, breaking into the airport because they got word that a flight from Israel was arriving. You can see the huge mob of people outside this airport storming the airport. You can see members of military, members of the police looking on, doing nothing as this happens. The mobs broke into the airport. They ran roughshod through the airport. More footage of this. Just huge crowds of people carrying Palestinian flags, rushing through the airport again, looking to get to the tarmac where this flight was supposedly landing from Tel Aviv. You can hear the Allahu Akbars, of course. Some 83% of Dagestan is Muslim in practice. They are literally going to the doors looking for Jews, trying to break through doors looking for Jews right now. This is what pogroms look like. They are running through the airport into private areas of the airport, obviously. People telling them there are no Jews here. It doesn't matter, they're still looking. And then they finally make their way out onto the tarmac, and they're looking for Jews. I mean, they're not particularly smart. Some of them are looking for Jews in the actual engine, which would be a weird place to find the Jews. Guys.
It is spiritual. There are principalities and powers and forces of evil, forces of wickedness in high places that are directed, that are aligned against the Jews. Oh, there you go. And it explains, like if you take a look at early history and look at all these gods, the Babylonian gods, the Assyrian gods, the Mesopotamian gods, the Canaanite gods, the Egyptian gods, the Nubian gods, the Greek gods, the Persian gods. You look at all these and you go, wait a minute, why do we have all this literature about all these stinking gods? What happened? These were the children of Noah, who was monotheistic. Why do we have all of these gods? Where did they come from? Now you know. Now you know.
So all those national gods of Moab and stuff, well, they were just the angelic things. So
there you go. They were Benai, the Benai Elohim. Turned Benai Elohim.
That elevated.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Okay. Whew. So there's a lot more. I mean, this is just the overkill is amazing. But I do recommend, if you want more about this, The Unseen World, or his last book, Demons. They're both very, very good sources.
Who?
Michael Heiser. Michael Heiser's book. Yeah, he died of pancreatic cancer earlier this year. But his books are absolutely, he was a fantastic theologian. Josh McDowell has a podcast. That's where I first saw him. Josh McDowell's son has a podcast, and he was on, and I was just blown away. It's like, wow, this changes my whole view. It explains so many questions that I've had in the Old and New Testament. It all fits. I'm going, wow, it's like a mosaic where we looked at it too close, but if you step back, you go, oh my gosh, now it makes sense. Now it makes sense. Okay?